welcome to BHU Chats on BHU TV. My name is Peter Karanja, and I will be your host. Today, I am joined by none other than Dr. James Keiller, who's going to join me today for a nice kind of informal chat to kind of go over some of the recent, opinions that he has on where academia is going, and we're going to go a little bit into the past, and we're just going to talk about Beulah Heights University. We are marching towards our 100-year anniversary in the next 2 years, so this is going to be our kickoff show, and there's no one better to be our first guest than Dr. James Keiller. I don't have to give you his bio. This is a man who has been the face of Beulah Heights University for over 50 years. So welcome, Dr. Keiller.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. It's a pleasure for me to be here and share with you, kind of talk a little bit about the university that has been so much a part of our life for most of our life.
Yeah.
So this is a real pleasure to be able to do this.
Awesome. So, Dr. Keiller, let's get right into it, because I know a lot of people, they've seen you here as the academic dean, but, they see you from a distance with so much reverence and respect. And I just wanted to get an opportunity to just kind of have a, conversation with you about the things that you've seen over the last 50 years and kind of to get an idea of where you see things are going. So let's start with I would call it the pre-institute era, I guess. It was when the Barths actually launched the school with the vision of actually go into a little bit of from what you've heard prior to you coming here of what was the vision of the Barths and why did they choose Atlanta, Georgia, which we all love, as the location for what is today Beulah Heights University.
Well, the Barths, Paul and Hattie Barth, were really the pioneers of traditional Pentecost in the Atlanta area, going way back, even preceding 1918, when the school was founded in July of 1918. The Lord had impressed on them the desire to train men and women, primarily for missionary work. The school started out primarily as a missionary training institute. And so that was their goal and their vision for Beulah Heights Bible Institute. They both led the university in a meeting in July of that year. They chose the gentleman who was to be the first president of Beulah Heights Bible Institute, and then succeeding him later was Paul Barth, and then when Paul Barth passed, then Dr. Hattie Barth, his wife, became the president of the institution and filled that role right up until 1956. The school, for many years, was a very, very small missionary training institute. It was founded here in Atlanta. The Barths' history of being in the Atlanta area dates back even post-Civil War days. The Barths had founded a small Pentecostal denomination called the Association for Pentecostal Assemblies. And in 1936, they merged with another small group out of Chicago called the National and International Pentecostal Missionary Union. And at that point, in 1936, made a organization called the International Pentecostal Assemblies, which the school was affiliated with for many, many years. And then in 1976, the International Pentecostal Assemblies merged with the Pentecostal Church of Christ, and the school still became closely affiliated with that group. The school went through a number of stages, first as Beulah Heights Bible Institute, then as Beulah Heights college, and then the board decided that we were a Bible college, and so they changed the name again to Beulah Heights Bible College. And that was our name for many years until we petitioned the state and our accrediting agencies to become Beulah Heights University. The real growth of the Institute took place when Dr. Samuel Chan became the president. He was one of our graduates. Sam had come from India, kind of rough around the edges. We often talked, and even after coming back as president, he often would tell the students that during his student days here, that there were times when I would call him into my office and tell him that he needed to get his act together, or we would have to send him home. Now, it wasn't anything bad. It was just that back then the rules were very, very strict, and sometimes he had a hard time obeying the rules, like most of the students did. Right. But that was in 1973. Sam finished in 77, went back home to India for a while and worked with his father, and then came back to the United States and pastored churches until the board called him to be the president in, I believe, 1986.
And that's the year that's the year Dr. Karanja now, who's the president, came, and that was the year that I came. So I remember that year. But he went back to Michigan for a while.
Yes.
Before coming back.
Yes, he went to Oregon and was a co-pastor there for a while, and then was called to a church in Hartford, Michigan, and went there and pastored for about 9 years. When our president, Dr. Richard Edwards, resigned to take a position at Baylor University in Texas.
I remember him because he used to give me and my sister, because my brother was in middle school at that time. He used to give us a ride to elementary school every morning. I remember him. You know, we had just come from Kenya, and you know, I remember him like every morning because he stayed in the. That's the time that the president of the college had a home on campus. And he would, every morning, he'd grab a big cup of coffee, and he'd have the electric shaver in the minivan as he's driving us to school. I don't know how he's able to do that, but I remember Jim Edwards, and a very brilliant guy. And he's actually a tenured professor now at Baylor, right?
Yes, as far as I know, he's still there.
Yes.
And has been there since he left Atlanta. Great fellow. Rich Edwards did a lot for the school. Our tenure began in August of 1964 when we were suddenly approached by the Board of Trustees of Beulah Heights to consider the possibility of coming as dean. The gentleman that had been the dean resigned, and the board was searching for someone who had the proper credentials to lead the school. The school was not accredited by a national recognized accrediting agency at that time, and the student body comprised of about 23 students. So the school had gone down considerably. It had never been very large, but the enrollment had gone down to where there was even some talk of closing the school. And I was pastoring in Michigan, had been there for 6.5 years. Of course, my wife, Darcel, who's now my wife, we were both students here at Beulah Heights. That's really where we met and started dating in the fall of 1954. Oh, wow. Love wasn't there, right? And so we always had a real love for Beulah Heights. Yes. I never dreamed that as a young man of 25 that I would answer the call to come as dean, because I was in a successful church in Michigan, and actually were planning to build a new church. And so when the board came to us at a conference in Michigan in August of 1964 and said, we would like for you to become dean because of the fact that you have the credentials that we need at this point. And so my wife and I, this was totally unexpected. My wife and I began to pray about it during the camp meeting conference that went on for a couple weeks in August. And we both felt, because they wanted an answer right then, which meant that I had to go back and resign my church and be here on campus by September 1st.
Wow.
And this was the middle of August.
And you were making a drive there, or were you coming by train?
No, we were driving.
Okay.
Our church was just about 100 miles from the conference that we were attending. So needless to say, I had to go back and tell the church that we were resigning to move to Atlanta, and it was extremely sudden for both them and us. And but that was a great experience. We the school was just really not even able financially to meet its mortgage payments at that time. And so the board said, we have an old house that you can live in, and we will pay you $100 a month, $1,200 a year, as long as the Lord supplies.
Wow, you think we could talk some employees into taking $1,200 a year?
So, well, actually, the faculty, we had only a couple full-time faculty. Their salary was $50 a month.
Wow.
For 9 months, because we didn't have summer school then. So they earned $450 a year.
Wow.
Two of them lived on campus. We had a couple other older houses that they lived in. But in the 98-year history of the school, there have been 8 presidents that have served. I have served with 5 of those 8, and the last 4 had been our students,
right,
including Dr. Karanja, who now is president, your father, who's now presently president of Beulah Heights. Real growth took place when Dr. Chan decided to come and accept the call as president. And we immediately he began to promote the school very heavily in the metro churches, particularly, to get our name there, even though the school was relatively old school. So many of the churches were not familiar with us.
Right. And
so he made a special effort. Sam, as you know, is very aggressive in his approaches. And so the growth started then.
And I think we were still living on campus around that time. And it's interesting because I remember coming in 87, and the school was more closed off. And I remember it had a lot of property here in this area. I think it was called Beulah Heights Campground. And I remember it being very closed off because I think a lot of the students were coming from the Midwest. They were being sent by their denominations to come from the Midwest to come here and get their education, and then go off to the whether it's the mission field or going to the ministry. But I remember when Dr. Chan started the transition, he was able to connect with the city of Atlanta, which is a city that has always been very diverse in terms of even when you look at the breakdown of demographics, whether it's African American churches, whether it's male to female ratio in terms of in the workforce. And remember, they said Atlanta was always the city that was too busy to hate. So it was interesting when you see those dynamics shift, and then for the university to have that growth. So for you, in your perspective, going back and remembering the history, because when you think about it, you've pretty much known all the presidents in some capacity, whether you taught them, whether it was your father. coming back here when you used to visit as a child, and you knew at least Hattie Barth, right?
I knew Dr. Barth. And in fact, she was the president when my wife and I, Darcel was not, we weren't married at the time, but both of us were students. She was president and also taught during the first couple of years of our tenure here as students. So we knew her well, a very godly woman that had really, her and her husband had not had a family, and they had really given everything to the future of Beulah Heights Bible Institute to make it succeed. So they were great people.
And it's interesting when you think about it, for the school to have the forward thinking at that time to allow her as a female, because when she became president, this was in the 30s.
She would have, I believe her husband, Paul Barth, passed away about 1942.
Okay.
And at that point, then she became president of the school.
Which was very forward-thinking.
Yes.
For an institution at that time. Yeah. And in the nation, she was probably one of the few female presidents of a college or an institute, especially for it being a religious school. So that's interesting that Beulah has had a history of forward thinking and being able to kind of break the mold on a lot of different levels. So when you used to come down as a kid, you used to pretty much terrorize the campus, huh?
Well, my father pastored in Macon, Georgia. He came as pastor there in 1946.
Okay.
And Dr. Barth would invite him to visit the campus as a visiting lecturer. And so he would come and spend a few days teaching, lecturing in classes. And I would come with him. And I was about 9 years old then. And I would just, as a 9-year-old mischievous boy, I would pull pranks on the girls in the girls' dorm.
Of course.
When they were in class, there were times that I would invade their rooms.
Yes.
So that was an interesting time for me, and that was my first experience with Beulah Heights. And at that time, Beulah Heights sponsored a camp meeting. There was a campgrounds just a couple blocks
right down the street. Yeah.
Yes, east of the campus, and that campground existed probably from the early 1900s till the last year of camp meeting was probably in the mid 1970s, and a lot of great things had taken place they had 2 weeks of summer camp in July, and it was just an open air tabernacle with sawdust floors,
old school,
and old wooden benches, just like the old time holiness camp meeting.
Dr. Keiller, what was your biggest when you were pastoring? And we have an interesting poster of when you were going to do an old style revival, and you were looking like a young James Dean mixed with Billy Graham, a handsome fella, and and it was a wonderful poster. So I wanted to know, who was your biggest influence in the ministry?
Well, back when I started preaching as a young person of 16. That was back in the mid-1950s. And in the traditional Pentecostal movement, divine healing was the big topic of the day.
Right.
And so you had men like Oral Roberts and Billy Graham and many men of that stature who were evangelizing. Oral Roberts was known for the divine healing ministry. Billy Graham more for preaching strong salvation messages. And huge citywide, area-wide campaigns. So men like that certainly had an influence on a teenage preacher.
Right.
My father, of course, being raised in a pastor's home, certainly had a great influence on my life as I was growing up, and then even as I entered the ministry. He still had a tremendous influence. But it was ministries like the gentleman I just named, Billy Graham, Oral Roberts, men of that stature that I admired because of what the Lord was doing through them in ministry in those days.
And it was always wonderful with Billy Graham. I remember, I believe in '96 when he did a crusade at the Dome here in Atlanta. And I remember as being kids and going to the front, that when he calls all the kids down on stage, and it felt like, because it never felt like Billy Graham belonged to any denomination, and never felt that it always just felt like he was always larger than everything, which I think is something that we're missing today. What are your thoughts on the, because we don't have people like Billy Graham. I mean, we have really big pastors, but we don't have somebody who seems like they're larger than life, that they can sit down with the president and you don't feel like they're into politics. Where do you see the church standing today, and where do you see the church evolving in the future from your perspective of being involved in ministry since you were 16 years old, and also contributing to it from a higher education level and like a practical level as a pastor, and being associated with the Barths, who established many different churches here in the city of Atlanta and probably in the nation. So from that historical perspective and going into the future as well, where do you see the church going in America?
Well, the Barths, of course, certainly Dr. Barth. I was not personally familiar with Paul Barth. He had passed away when I would have been just a young child of maybe 4 or 5 years old. But Dr. Barth, Dr. Hattie Barth, had a great influence as a real woman of God, great influence in my life. I had the privilege for the first 2 years that I was a student here, I had the privilege of sitting under her ministry, both as a pastor of the church as well as president, and she also taught classes at the Institute. The Barths had a great vision for education. I don't think they ever envisioned the school growing to where we are today. But in 1940, the Assemblies of God was very much a part of the whole structure of Beulah Heights. Southeastern Bible Institute that had been founded in Alabama moved to Atlanta, and they joined with Beulah Heights, and it was known as Beulah Heights Southeastern Bible Institute.
Wow.
For several years. So a lot of the Assemblies of God preachers and pastors came through the school at that time. Later, the assemblies decided to leave, and they accepted property in Lakeland, Florida, where they are today. And now, of course, they're Southeastern University. But before Beulah Heights Bible Institute was a degree-granting institution, many of our graduates would transfer to Southeastern Bible College at that time in Florida to earn their degree, because they were an accredited school as well. So the whole idea of education, as it has evolved for us here at Beulah Heights, again coming back to the time when Dr. Chan became president, and the two of us were traveling to Nashville, Tennessee to attend a TRACS meeting in 1992. The school had an enrollment then probably about 100 students. And as we were traveling, and we've talked about this many times since, and he's mentioned it many times since, as we were traveling, we were dreaming of the future of Beulah Heights.
Right.
And one of the things that we agreed on was, wouldn't it be wonderful if someday Beulah Heights Bible College had 200 students? That was our dream. If you had told us while we were on that trip that someday Beulah Heights would be a fully accredited university with a full undergraduate and a full graduate program, and that we would, I think our highest enrollment had exceeded 800 students. If you had told us then, we would have said absolutely not. God is able to do a lot, but that's beyond our dreams.
Right.
It'd be nice if that would happen, but that's beyond our dreams.
Right.
So in many ways, what we see today is a dream.
Yes.
That we had, and it's been a delight in August it will be 52 years that I've been here with Beulah Heights. My passion for the university, having seen it come through so many stages to where we are today, my passion is just as great, if not greater, than the year I set foot on campus as dean in 1964. My expectations for the future of Beulah Heights University exceeds what I might be dreaming, because if somebody tells me today that Beulah Heights University will eventually have 1,000 or 2,000 students, I'll say, amen, it can happen.
Absolutely.
It's not impossible, it can happen.
Yes.
And I really believe our best days, if we're good stewards of what God entrusts to us, I believe our best days are still in the future.
Yes.
And I really believe that. That's not just a cliche of mine. I really believe that. God has great things in store for us if he delays his coming. Of course, he could come any time, but
that's right.
If he doesn't and he delays his coming, I believe our best is yet to come.
Yes, and that's an interesting thing, and that just kind of shows the type of individual that you are, and that even when we're in, it always seems that the country of the world is always in despair, that there's always room for optimism, and that just shows the type of person that you are and the influence that you have on the people around you, because everybody believes that when they hear Dr. Keiller say that the best days are ahead of us, everybody truly believes that. One thing that people may not know about Dr. Keiller is that he has a beautiful singing voice. You're a baritone, right?
I guess.
Yeah. Weren't you in a band at one time?
Well, when we were students, we had a quartet called the Gospel Airs.
I can't make that up. I cannot make that up. You were in a barbershop quartet.
Well, it wasn't barbershop because we had music.
Okay.
Barbershop usually did not have music. And probably the highlight of that quartet was when we sang in the City Auditorium in East Point, Georgia.
Oh, wow.
Years ago, back in the mid-1950s. So yeah, those were good student days.
That's awesome, and then we have some nice pictures with you guys dressed up nice, and that's amazing. Another question: when being in a location in Atlanta, and just kind of watching history unfold, take us to the time of from when the civil, when you come down from Michigan, you take over, you're in this old building, you have a pay phone in your living room. You have to pay to make a phone call. You're getting paid $100 a month, and the country is changing right before your eyes. Give us some perspective on you being almost 2 miles away from Dr. King's home, the historical Ebenezer Church, and just the impact that had on not only the city of Atlanta, but Beulah Heights University and also the nation at that time.
Well, those were days that are recorded in history as probably one of the most turbulent times that our nation has experienced in the last 50 years. The 60s, as you know, were made up of a lot of unrest because of the Vietnam War. College campuses, university campuses were in disarray, with students rebelling and marching and burning, many times burning buildings, taking possession of buildings. It was just a bad time for the nation as a whole. And it was during that time, as you know, that during the 60s that Dr. King was assassinated. We were here in Atlanta during those days. I have to give a lot of credit to the African American leadership of this city and the gentleman who was the mayor, Ivan Allen, who was a real friend of the African American community. And they were able together to calm a city that was terribly upset because one of their main residents had been assassinated, the leader of the civil rights movement of the day. And it could have been a very, very difficult time for the city of Atlanta because of the proximity of the Martin Luther King home site where he was raised, and Ebenezer Baptist Church where he co-pastored with his father, and of course just the whole influence that he had on the civil rights movement nationally. It could have been a time of rioting and burning here in Atlanta, and that didn't happen because of the leadership of the city. And so there's a lot to be said for the church, and particularly the African American church in the metro city of Atlanta, having kept the lid on things during those terrible, trying days.